and then we're good to go. Alrighty. We're in the middle of discussing the Tikunei Zohar. Well, I shouldn't say we're in the middle. We're actually at the beginning of discussing the Tikunei Zohar. Again, for those who are not familiar, the Tikunei Zohar is one of the parts of the Zohar written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. The Tikunei Zohar is an explanation of the first word of the Bible, the first word of the Torah, the word Bereshit. And there's 70 different combinations of the word. As many of you are aware, the Hebrew word can often be broken down into different components, and not only different components, but also with different tzirufim, with different sequence of the letters, and each of them has, well, not necessarily, but in this case there are 70 different permutations of the word Bereshit, which are discussed in this particular text called the Tikunei Zohar. Again, the word Tikun means both rectification and also means a garment. In other words, it's dressing up ideas in which are really transcend human intellect, and dressing them up in such a way in garments so that we can at least come to some rudimentary understanding of what they're all about. Last week we discussed the first Tikkun, and this week we are going to discuss the second one. So the second Tikkun on the word Bereshit is, let me just get the screen, there we go. If you will have a look over here, you will see in red is one word and in black the other. Again, not necessarily in the permutation that they found in the word Bereshit, but the Reish Aleph Yud Taf form the word Yirat, which means fear of, or a better way of saying it is awe of, A-W-E, awe of something. And then the remaining two letters, Shin Bet, the Bet and the Shin Bet, spell the word, it could be the word Shav meaning to return. It could be the word Shave, meaning to stay in your place. And it could be interpreted as Sav, not Shav, but Sav, a sin rather than a Shin. And that means to grow old. Now, I'm going to explain all of these meanings. But let's begin at the beginning. The word Yirat, fear of. Now, there's two words really, well, more than two words, but two main words for fear in Hebrew. One is the word Pachad, as it says regarding Isaac, Yitzchak. Pachad Yitzchak Hayali. Right? And Jacob says, the fear of my father was granted to me. In other words, that he whom his father feared, he whom his father was in awe of, i.e. God, is whom he feared. That's the word pachad. However, that's not the word that's used over here. The word that's used over here is the word yirat. Yira. I'll just highlight it for a minute. Let me highlight this word, and let's see if we can. Yeah, there. I put it in yellow. Yirat. So, what is the concept of yira as opposed to pachad? Pachad is very much an emotional idea. Fear is an emotional thing. However, yira indicates something more than just an emotional fear. It really it's indicative of something that is more mental than it is emotional, or at least equally mental to emotional. In other words, it's an intellectual rather than an emotional type of response. That's why it's usually best translated not as fear, which is a feeling in the heart, but rather as awe, which is more an expression of the mind. Awe or reverence for something, which is what the word Yira indicates. The Yira in Hebrew, Yira, with a hay on the end, is the word fear. Yirat, fear of, right? It's I think it's called the construct form. In any event, Yira is a concept. It's to a certain extent a mental concept as well as being an emotional one. It's an emotion of the mind, if one could put it that way. Now, what do we mean by an emotion of the mind? The concept of reverence, the concept of fear in the mind. Now, we all know, I assume we all know, that as a person thinks, very often so he emotes. His emotions follow our thinking about things. So very often when a person thinks of something which is fearful, so immediately, or maybe not quite immediately, but very, very soon, the signs of fear are going to appear physically. In other words, he experiences the emotion of fear. A person could experience, he or she, obviously, a person could experience a rush of adrenaline. The pulse beat goes up and so on and so forth. And what one fears in one's mind becomes reflected in the heart. It works the other way as well, obviously. But since the mind controls the heart, and this is in fact one of the discoveries of cognitive behavioral therapy and other modern psychological methods, many of these psychological methods understand that the mind can control the emotions. And therefore, in order to control emotions, so one has to rethink what it is that is causing the unwanted emotion. Now, the emotion of fear is not necessarily an unwanted emotion in the strict sense of it, because fear of the right things, in other words, what we would call fear of God, or simply in a simple thing, in a simple sense, fear of a charging bull is a good thing, right? Otherwise, you're not going to jump out of the way or try and seek some kind of shelter or protection against something dangerous. So fear is obviously a necessary thing, and in some cases a good thing. But what we mean over here, what the Zohar is talking about, what the Tikunei Zohar is talking about, is not fear in the sense of fear of danger or fear of fear in a negative sense. What it's talking about is much more the concept of fear in the heart would be fear that contains and suppresses one from doing things that are bad for you, in a spiritual sense. So fear of God means constraining yourself. It is also known in Kabbalistic and in particularly in Hasidic terminology as accepting upon oneself the yoke of heaven. It's called the lower fear. Accepting upon oneself the yoke of heaven. In other words, accepting upon oneself self-limitations, limitations which are imposed by the Torah, but accepting them willingly upon oneself in order to live a life that is somewhat restricted. You can't do whatever you want, but for a very good purpose, for a very good reason. The reason being that a life which is restricted is a life which is not scattered, let's put it that way. When one focuses and one restricts oneself from certain experiences and certain ways of acting and certain ways of thinking and certain ways of speaking and so on, so that self-restriction or that restriction that's imposed by the Torah, which you accepted willingly, that prevents a lot of negative consequences in life, as we see with politicians recently. One of the one of the laws of the Torah is when a man is alone in female company, if it's not his wife or his daughter or his mother or his sister, then the door must remain open, or in some way or another person has to be in the room, and so on, in order to prevent certain things which we see. So that's restriction. Those kinds of things are restriction, and those restrictions are positive restrictions in order to accept upon oneself the right way of doing things. That's called the yoke of heaven, right? The yoke of heaven is following what it says in the guidelines of the Torah, the guidelines of Scripture. Okay, that's one kind of Yira. That's called the lower Yira. However, there is a higher aspect of Yira, a higher aspect of this fear of this, which is called awe. What does it mean to be in awe of something? To be in awe of something is to come to a realization that there is something bigger than you. There is something bigger than you. Now, that is a very, in some ways, a very sobering thought, but in other, it makes you feel smaller. But in other ways, it's a very uplifting idea, a very uplifting thought. To understand that one is part of a bigger picture, that one is part of something greater than oneself, even though you might feel a little bit like a cog in a machine, although it's not really like that, but even though you might feel that at times, nevertheless, that idea that you are participating in a mission which transcends you, it's greater than you, is it's a tremendously uplifting thing. One of the saddest things that one can witness is when a person comes to the end of their lives, and if you would ask them to look back upon their lives and what it is that they that they achieved in life, there will be, unfortunately, many people who won't be able to look back and say, well, this is what I was part of. Yes, true, a person can have done well financially. He could have done, he or she could have done well in terms of, raising a family and so on. These are very commendable things, very good things, no question about it. But most people want to feel that they left behind kind of a legacy. It's not just that I lived my life honestly and I didn't steal from anybody and I didn't cheat anybody and I didn't, I didn't kill anybody, God forbid, and so on and so forth. That's not enough. A person wants to feel that he perpetuates himself in one way or another. That's what it means to be part of something larger than yourself, even though you might not be the largest cog and the most important cog in the machine, so to speak. By doing what it is that you do well, or let me rephrase that, by doing what it is that you do, by playing your part and playing it well and doing it to its fullest, your mission in this world has been accomplished. If one can look back on one's life and say, my mission is fulfilled, that is a feeling of tremendous achievement, a feeling of tremendous accomplishment. And for many people, this is a very important thing, to feel that they've accomplished something. And not just accomplish something for themselves, but accomplish something for the whole, for that which is larger than themselves. That's the sense of this word yiras. So, hidden within the word Bereshit, the word Bereshit again, it means in the beginning of creation. Hidden within this word, in the beginning of creation, is the purpose of creation. And part of the purpose of that creation is to understand that I am part of that purpose. I've been put here, I'm here for a reason. I have a role to play. Even though someone else's role is going to be different from mine, because there's no need for God to create two people who are completely identical and have exactly the same role. It's enough for one person to do that. But without me fulfilling my role, the purpose of creation is not yet fulfilled. So this is what the Zohar is focusing on over here, the Tikunei Zohar. It's focusing on the idea that since you're part of something else, you're part of something much greater than you, that is fulfilling the purpose of your coming into being within creation. Now, let's look at the second word. The second word over here could be read as shave. It could be read as shave. Shave means to sit. Usually, or let's put it this way, to remain in your place. To remain in your place. Usually when one feels fear, what is the response to fear? To run away, right? And the usual response to fear is to run away. So we're talking here, says the Zohar, we are talking about a type of fear, or the commentaries on the Tikunei Zohar explain, we're talking about a type of fear, a type of awe that doesn't cause you to run away, but causes you to remain in your place. Remain in your place in a positive sense. In other words, don't remain stuck in your place. We're not talking about that. But we're talking about not avoiding, not running away, but remaining here and accepting the challenge. Accepting the challenge of playing your part in that which is bigger than you. That's what the first meaning of the word is. From the word shave, to remain in your place and not run away from the responsibilities of fulfilling your goal in life. A second explanation is that it's from the word sav meaning to grow old. Because this type of awe grows with age, or at least it should. It grows with age, and it's often something that people achieve only later on in life. When you're young and your blood's boiling and you're a big shot and so on and so forth, and you're out, one of the young bucks. I don't know what a young female is called, but you're one of the young. You're a youngster in one way or another, and you're full of energy and full of passion and full of so on and so forth. So that type of awe doesn't really come in until it doesn't kick in usually until somewhat later. With some young people, it does. But in general, that's the way it is. It's something that, in other words, that tells you that it's going to come in stage. At some stage in your life you will reach when you start to experience this idea of the bigger picture, something that's bigger than you. That's the word sav. And the third meaning of the word is the word shav. Shav means to return, from the word tshuva. Right? Yira shav means, therefore, the awe that one experiences when one returns to one's essence. What does it mean to return to one's essence? To return to one's essence is to return to one's creator, to return to the one who sent you here. It could be that we ran away from that, like the famous story of Jonah. Jonah was sent on a mission to warn the city of Nineveh that it was about to be overturned and everyone was going to be destroyed. But he did not want this mission. He didn't want to go on the mission. According to some, because he was afraid that people would just mock and scoff at him, and they wouldn't listen to him, and he would just be a laughing stock. Others explained it in a deeper way that he didn't want to do that because he knew that if the people of Nineveh returned and repented of their ways, that would reflect badly on his own people who had still not repented. And he didn't want that to happen. There's many ways of explaining this, but in any event, those are two of the explanations. So the idea of shav is tshuva, to return. To return to yourself, meaning to return essentially to the mission which you have been given, which is the purpose that the Creator put you in this world, and therefore you're returning to Him. You're returning to your Creator. So that idea, the idea therefore of Yiras Shav, is to be in awe in a positive way, not fearing your mission, but to be in awe, to revere the mission which you've been given. to have reverence for that idea that you're a unique entity that can fulfill a part of this greater picture that really nobody else can do. And that is the second Tikkun in Tikunei Zohar. It's very, very short, but that's the gist of it. So if there are any questions, I can take some questions now. But there's nothing really more to say about that. Let me just check on the chat. A doe. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, a young buck is a doe. Okay, fair enough. Good. All right. Any other questions? Like leishev basuka? Yeah. Leishev would be to sit, to dwell in the sukkah, in the tabernacle. All right. Anyone else? Any other questions? I'll wait another minute or two if people are typing questions. I don't. Can you talk a little bit about willpower? Is that like a restriction? Yes, it can be. Yes, it can be, Wendy. Willpower can be a restriction. One uses one's willpower to restrict oneself from doing certain things. The question is, does it really work? Does willpower work against emotions? It can, but it's quite a difficult struggle. There's a lot of things that one can do to sort of boost that willpower. A lot of things that one, in fact, must do, otherwise it's not going to work. And one of them is to use the mind to reframe the situation which one was in previously, that you want to use your willpower to restrict. But yes, willpower is it is a restriction of some sort. It's restricting us to a certain, usually restricting behavior or sometimes emotions. Restricting emotions is a lot more difficult than restricting behavior. It can work, but again, it's not so easy. There's we would actually have to devote a whole lesson to explaining how how to use one's willpower to get what is necessary in life. But we'll talk about it another time. I'm not sure what you mean by that, Frank. Okay, Terry, how do you know when it's time to let go and leave your mission? Usually when it's accomplished. When the mission is accomplished, then of course you would not have to continue with it. However, it could be that one feels that that things have changed in oneself to such a degree, or one's circumstances have changed to such a degree that one has to really refocus and reorient oneself. Now, it's a very good, important point that Terry's pointing out over here. It's not necessarily true that a person does one mission for his entire life. It could be that once he's fulfilled his mission, or at least done his part of it, it's time to take on a new mission. Usually the best way to deal with that is to discuss it privately with someone who understands these things. But failing that, it's certainly possible to see, for example, just to use a sort of a very concrete example. Let's say someone is working in a certain position, working in a job of some sort, and for whatever reason that job comes to an end. Either the person gets fired, or the business closes down, or there's no longer any need for what he was doing because it's been automated, or whatever, who knows. Maybe he's reached a certain age, it's not relevant to him anymore, and so on and so forth. So one can, of course, try and reconstitute that job somewhere else, try and find the same kind of work, Or alternatively, one could figure out that maybe I'm supposed to be doing something else. Maybe I'm supposed to be doing something more meaningful, more productive, more engaging, more responsible in the community, and so on and so forth. It could be a lot of different things. Yeah, so that could be an example of taking a different mission. Can you have more than one mission at a time? Yes, I'm sure that everybody does. Just like, a person can be a parent, he can be a brother or a sister, a person can be an employer or an employee, a person can be a friend, a mentor, a counselor, all at the same time, right? But there's usually like one overarching mission that this particular soul has to fulfill. Now, it often happens that a person manages to fulfill what it is that he was in. Doesn't have to take his whole life necessarily, or her whole life. One can fulfill it at a certain age and then move on to another thing. It depends on the stages of life and so on and so forth. And one could make an analysis of what that is, possibly to do with one's name and so on. So Frank is asking over here, it's a shin, the second letter is a bet, not a vav. The second letter is a bet, not a vav. So it would be shin bet, not shin vav. Okay. And that would be, if they were tough on the end, it would be like Shabbat. You're right. Okay. Let's, are there any more questions? Anybody else? Okay. If there are no other questions, then we will call it a day. I am intending